I'm not a lone voice. I'm not a man on his own agenda. I stand here today as a representative of a significant fraction of parliamentarians who have stood to say no to an unconstitutional constitutional amendment process. We have members of parliament who have raised their voices to demand that this process must go to the people. We have members of parliament who, albeit being obvious beneficiaries of the term extension, have said we will not abandon the agreement and the covenant we made with the people in 2023 when we went to the election. We do have, of course, some who have chosen the path of being unclear or the path of ambiguity. And this is where I want to speak to the people of Zimbabwe. You voted these members of parliament to go to Mount Upton. You voted them in 2023 to represent.
There are politicians who talk, and there are politicians who know the law. The most dangerous one for any government trying to do something illegal is a politician who does both. His name is Agency Gumbo, Member of Parliament, Hartcliffe Constituency, Citizens Coalition for Change, the CCC, and a qualified lawyer, not a politician who studied law 20 years ago and forgot it. A man who has spent years inside Zimbabwean courts defending activists, opposition members, and ordinary citizens against a government that has repeatedly used the law as a weapon against its own people. And this week, Agency Gumbo stood up, not in a court, in the court of public opinion. And he said something that the government of Zimbabwe does not want Zimbabweans to hear clearly. CAB3 is illegal, not unpopular, not controversial, not just unfair, illegal. And he went further. He said, stop frog marching people to participate in a flawed process. Stop forcing Zimbabweans through intimidation, through fear, through state machinery to attend consultations for a bill that should never have been written in the first place. Today, we unpack exactly what Agency Gumbo is saying, why he is saying it, and why, as a lawyer, his voice on this matter carries weight that no politician's opinion alone can carry. Share this documentary right now. Because what Agency Gumbo is raising is not a party political argument. It is a constitutional legal argument. And every Zimbabwean, whether they support CCC or ZANU-PF or no party at all, has a right to hear it clearly. Share this, then let us break it all down. Before we get into the legal arguments, let us understand who this man is. Agency Gumbo is the Member of Parliament for Hartcliffe constituency in Harare. He is a member of the Citizens Coalition for Change, the main opposition party in Zimbabwe, led by Nelson Chamisa. But what makes Gumbo different from most MPs is his professional background. He is a practicing lawyer. Agency Gumbo has represented CCC members in some of the most serious political cases in Zimbabwe in recent years, standing in court for activists and opposition figures who have been arrested, beaten, and detained by the state. He has been in the trenches of Zimbabwe's legal battles. He knows what the Constitution says. He knows what it means, and he knows when it is being violated. That is why when Agency Gumbo says CAB3 is illegal, this is not political noise. It is a legal opinion from a man who reads constitutions for a living. Now, let us get into the substance. Why does Agency Gumbo and many other legal minds say CAB3 is illegal? The answer is found in one specific section of Zimbabwe's constitution, section 328. The Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Bill 3, officially gazetted on the 16th of February 2026, proposes replacing the direct popular election of the president with election by a joint sitting of parliament. It proposes extending presidential and parliamentary terms from 5 to 7 years. It proposes enlarging the Senate with 10 presidential appointees. And it proposes transferring the voters' roll to the Registrar General, removing it from the Independent Electoral Commission. Those are the changes on paper. But here is the legal war that those changes crash into. At the heart of the legal dispute are provisions that would extend the tenure of current office holders despite constitutional safeguards specifically designed to prevent incumbents from benefiting from changes made during their own term of office. Read that slowly. Zimbabwe's constitution was written with a very specific protection. If you change the rules while you are in the game, you cannot benefit from those new rules. You cannot be the referee and also be the player who rewrites the rules midway through the match. That protection exists because Zimbabwe lived under Robert Mugabe for 37 years. The people of Zimbabwe who voted for the 2013 constitution put that protection there deliberately. They said never again. No sitting president can change the rules to give himself more time. And yet, that is exactly what CAB3 tries to do. The applicants in the Constitutional Court challenge argue that the proposed changes under CAB 3 are unlawful and should be nullified. Unlawful, not just unfair, unlawful. That is what Agency Gumbo is echoing when he stands up and says CAB 3 is illegal. He is not making a political statement. He is reading the Constitution out loud for everyone to hear. Now, let us address the second part of Agency Gumbo's message. He said, stop frog marching people to participate in a flawed process. What does that mean in practice? Under Section 328 of the Constitution, before CAB3 can even go to Parliament for a vote, the government must conduct a mandatory 90-day public consultation process. The idea behind this requirement is important. The Constitution belongs to the people. Before their representatives can change it, the people must be genuinely consulted. They must hear the proposals. They must be free to say yes or no. But what has actually been happening at these consultations across Zimbabwe? The Zimbabwe Solidarity Movement, which sent observers to consultations in Bulawayo, Wedza, Dema, and Harare, said the process is not a democratic consultation. They described it as a choreographed sham, a desperate attempt to provide a veneer of legalism to what is effectively a constitutional coup. They said their members attended hearings in good faith, but were met with state-sponsored sabotage, abductions, and physical brutality. Dissenting voices were systematically silenced. People went to consultations to say no to CAB3, and they were met with abductions and physical brutality. The movement said that regime puppets were platformed while dissenting voices were muzzled, arguing that the process violates key provisions of the Constitution which require public participation to be genuine. Genuine, that is the word the Constitution uses. Not theatrical, not choreographed, not forced, genuine. When you bus in ruling party supporters to fill consultation venues, when you beat and abduct people who show up to say no, when you silence every voice that disagrees, that is not a consultation. That is a performance. And Agency Gumbo, as a lawyer, knows the difference. He is saying, do not dress up intimidation as democracy. Do not call a frog march a public consultation. Here is what gives Agency Gumbo's argument its full legal backing. He is not alone in this fight. The Constitutional Court had a challenge filed by former Binga North legislator Prince Dubeko Sibanda against CAB3. Sibanda argues that clauses extending the terms of the President and Parliament violate constitutional amendment procedures and are constitutionally incompetent. The court reserved judgment, meaning its ruling is still coming, and that ruling will determine whether the proposed amendments pass the test of constitutionality. Constitutionally incompetent, not just wrong politically, constitutionally, legally incompetent. And there is a second case, which we reported on earlier this week, brought by war veterans and civic activists, directly challenging Mnangagwa's right to preside over a process that personally benefits him. The ruling on these cases, awaited with great anticipation, will determine the trajectory of Zimbabwe's governance for years to come. Two separate cases, both sitting before the highest court in the land, and both making the same fundamental argument that Agency Gumbo is making. This bill is illegal. The process is flawed, and a president cannot rewrite the rules of his own game. Let me close with this. Agency Gumbo is not the first person to say CAB 3 is illegal. Lawyers have said it. War veterans have said it. Constitutional scholars have said it. Civic organizations have said it. The Law Society of Zimbabwe has said it. The Law Society of Zimbabwe has already warned Parliament that key provisions of CAB 3 are unconstitutional and that, if adopted without a referendum, their adoption will be inconsistent with the Constitution, international law, inconsistent with the Constitution, and inconsistent with international law. Those words were written by lawyers, read by MPs, submitted to Parliament. And still the consultations continued. Still people were being buzzed in. Still dissenting voices were being beaten and silenced. That is why the voice of Agency Gumbo matters today. Because he sits inside Parliament. He is not shouting from the street. He is not posting on Twitter. He is a member of Parliament, a lawyer, a man who has stood in Zimbabwean courts and defended the very constitution that CAB 3 is trying to dismantle. And he is saying clearly, firmly, and without apology, this is illegal. Do not take it to the people. Not like this. Because a consultation built on fear is not a consultation. A process that silences opposition is not democratic. And a constitutional amendment that allows a sitting president to extend his own term is not a constitutional amendment. It is a theft of the people's voice, a theft of the people's vote, a theft of the future that Zimbabweans voted for when they approved their constitution in 2013. Agency Gumbo is doing what every lawyer who enters Parliament should do. He is reading the law and he is refusing to pretend that what is happening is legal. Zimbabwe's Constitutional Court has reserved its judgment. The people of Zimbabwe are waiting, and Agency Gumbo lawyer, MP, and citizen is making sure that when that judgment comes, nobody can say they were not warned. CAB 3 is illegal. Do not take it to the people.